Welcome back to the Queen's Park Report. We are back once again, and of course, I'm your host, James Bowler, and I'm joined by our MPP, Norm Miller.
Nice to be here with you from a distance, James.
Yes, Norm, you're joining us from your home office once again, and we appreciate you taking the time of doing this.
It's my pleasure. Look forward to the day when we can be in the same room again.
Absolutely. Yeah, hopefully that day comes soon. I'm sure it won't be that soon, but sooner than later. Now, speaking of, when we can start getting back to normal, it looks like Ontario's numbers are getting a bit better. Now, obviously, we all take that with a grain of salt, but I am just curious, Norm, from your perspective, what does this mean for Parry Sound-Muskoka right now?
I think it's encouraging, and it shows that people in the area and across the province have, for the great majority of people, been following instructions and social distancing and staying home for a large part and doing all the things you have to do to keep us all safe. So, they say that with the modeling, the first modeling came out a few weeks ago, and they showed sort of worst case scenario and best case scenario. And the worst case scenario was pretty bad, and the hospitals and the whole health system planned for that because, of course, you have to. And the good news is that the most recent checking of the modeling is that we are at the best case scenario. So that's great news. We still have 400 to 600 new cases a day, but it's been flat for quite a while, for a number of days now. And so I would say it's sort of light at the end of the tunnel. I know when our caucus was last briefed by the Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. David Williams, he talked about the reproductive factor, and that if it's less than 1, then you were winning. If it's greater than 1, you were losing. And a couple of weeks ago, it was at 1.48, and maybe a week ago it was down to 1.06. So really trending in the right direction. I think that's great news that we have hope that if we keep doing what we're doing, we can't give up yet because we are making progress. But if we keep doing what we're doing, then hopefully we'll be able to get back to some sort of new normal and get things opening up again in the not too distant future.
So speaking of that, I know, there's been discussion about reopening the economy. Obviously, we are not at that point yet. I know the rule of thumb right now is less than 200 before we actually get to that, which we're nowhere near. But despite all that, there are discussions about opening the economy again. I know you've submitted some ideas as well. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've been doing a lot of talking to constituents and lots of. I tell you, it's pretty busy. Through the whole COVID-19 time, I've hardly left our home other than to go to drop the garbage off. That's been about it for about 5 weeks. So I have more time because I would typically spend hundreds of hours driving around, the riding into Toronto and back, etc. So saving a lot of money on gas and a lot less time in a vehicle. But it's certainly been really busy on the phone with individual constituents. Tons of calls with regard to sort of the uncertainty and lots of questions. And as you know, Scott Aitchison organized a number of Zoom calls as well. So we've been, busy with that. So he organized these Zoom calls. So there were 5 calls covering pretty much the whole riding. The only part I think they were counting using the chambers of commerce. The only part that was kind of inadvertently, I guess, not specifically invited because it was used through the Chamber of Commerce, was the unorganized territories in the far north. But otherwise, there were 5 hour-and-a-half Zoom meetings organized through all the chambers of commerce to get input from businesses on and questions from businesses on all the various government programs. So that was really good because you had Scott Aitchison, our federal member, able to talk about the evolving various federal programs like the CERB and wage subsidy, et cetera. And I of course, could talk to the provincial aspects, and we had mayors on every one of those programs. So that was really good. In addition to that, prior to that, and I had organized a bunch of teleconferences for the riding of Parry, Sound-Muskoka, sort of based on various sectors. So did a teleconference with, just marinas on it, and another one with just children's camps on it, and another one with retail businesses that were essential on it, another with retail that non-essential, and various different sectors to sort of get input from businesses and take questions from businesses as well. So from those meetings, certainly have come lots of suggestions. Every business wants to be able to reopen, so lots of suggestions on what might open first. And I have, from that, written to the committee, that's provincial committee that's charged with making a plan to reopen, and certainly have specifically written about businesses like marinas, which are essentially non-essential with very limited functions happening right now, landscaping businesses which are shut down, small commercial construction which is shut down, garden centers with and golf courses as well, with recommendations on how they might be able to open once we start to do better, as you mentioned, down to at least, I think what the Chief Medical Officer of Health said was down to 200 or less new cases per day is what I heard him say. So working towards being able to reopen is the key. So I've made suggestions with regard to all those businesses and written formally to that committee. And I think for any business, especially the lots of businesses out there right now that have zero revenue, government programs are great, but it'd be better to be able to be back in business. So that's certainly the goal, as long as it can be done in a way that's safe.
So, Norm, Doug Ford was recently quoted as saying, I believe it was on one of these morning radio shows, it was saying that he was looking at the Victoria Day weekend as a sort of jumping off point to reopening the economy. And then he sort of backtracked later in the day and said that he more wanted to look at that as a sort of trickle opening and not, specifically Victoria Day weekend. So I'm just curious, how likely, Victoria Day weekend is 4 weeks away now? How likely are we looking at something like that as a starting date to start trickling the economy again?
Yeah, and as you say, at first the Premier had made it sound, or I guess it was quoted, I didn't actually see it, but that things would be opening up Victoria Day. And then I did see it the next day when he made it very clear that no, things would not be back to normal on May 24th, that it would be based on the advice of the Chief Medical Officer of Health, and that things would be opening very gradually and very slowly. So, we're expecting next week, to have a plan from Rod Phillips and the committee, the Jobs and Recovery Committee, that has a bunch of ministers on it. And they've been consulting with all sorts of different sectors as well. So I would expect next week will lay out sort of the framework for what opening might look like. And that's the sorts of things I would like to see opening. As long as, I'm confident as long as everybody keeps doing the right thing, that we'll see better and better progress on the health side. So I would like to see. I've heard we have tons of marinas in Parry, Sound-Muskoka, and some of the big marinas that sell a lot of boats. Talked to one marina, I won't name the names, but they told me they have $18.5 million in inventory, sold boats from the boat show and their sales that they have to pay interest on, and right now they can't deliver it, and they need the money to pay the bills. They also need time, because rigging these boats takes time as well. So they would like to be able to deliver those boats, and frankly, I'm sure they can do it in a way that they don't have to be closer than 6 feet from a person to necessarily deliver a new boat, and that way the customer will get their new boat, and the marina would be able to do some work and employ some people, and and I don't think there would be a health consequence. As well with marinas, they're coming up with a really busy season when they're going to have a whole bunch of boats ready for the summer season. So I think it would be good to allow those marinas to be able to get the boats ready, so that they're when they're given the go ahead to be able to launch the boats, that they'll be able to do so, because it's not something they can do in a day or a week. It'll probably takes them a month to get all the boats serviced and ready. So that's the sort of thing I'd like to, as I mentioned, landscaping. I think that's the sort of thing with the proper protocol. If you have a small landscaping crew, the trickiest part's probably how you get to the site. But once you're on a site, you can easily maintain 6 feet away and have protocols for sterilizing things, et cetera, to be able to do that. Even as we, and I don't know what phase it's at, but even something like golf courses. I know Don Mackay at Muskoka Highland sends me an email about every other day, and I've passed his emails on to the Minister of Tourism, and as I say, I've written to the committee with suggestions on how other provinces and other areas have phased in the opening of golf courses. And, it probably looks like, to begin with, or if you go in a cart, it's one person in a cart and they're sanitized after every use. And he was even saying you wouldn't pick the ball out of the hole, that you just tee it and it hits a stick, or hits whatever you call the flag, I guess it is. So I think there's ways of doing it that will not endanger health at all, that will allow a business to survive and employ people, so that they're not reliant on all the various government programs. Because frankly, also the government just can't afford, all levels of government can't afford to fund the whole economy. So the more businesses that can be allowed to operate and generate some revenue and employ some people in a safe way, then the better, from my perspective.
Norm, we do need to take a quick break. Before we do that, I just want to ask one last question. This is on the same topic, but in a different gear. There's been some comment about Minister Lachey making any update on what's happening with the school system. I'm just wondering if you've heard anything from the inner group about the possibility of schools opening at the end of May, or are we more likely to see a complete closure to the end of the year?
Yeah, and I'm not sure. And I know the last conversation we had on a caucus meeting, they were talking about, it's still a staged approach, and with not writing the year off yet, but sort of every 2 weeks trying to figure out if it was going to be possible, again, completely based on how we're doing in terms of the health of health outcomes. So at this point, really not an answer to you, but it's every couple of weeks they're updating it. So I'm not sure.
Okay. Norm, we're going to take a quick break. Before the break here, we were discussing education and the possibility of when schools would be reopening. We're still not really sure on that. But the one thing we do know is that when schools reopen, it looks like the teachers are back on the job once again. So can you tell me a bit about how that came about?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm very happy that all the various unions, education unions and teachers unions, have, I think tentatively, I'm not sure that they're all ratified yet, but have made agreements with the government, because, prior to COVID, that was certainly, and for many months had been an ongoing situation. So, I'm just pleased that there are agreements that have been made. I think the province had moved on a number of the issues. It seems almost ironic now, but one of the issues, of course, for the secondary schools was online learning, and I think we'd moved to the position that 2 online courses would be required in the entire high school time that a student spent in high school, and on a number of other issues that the government had moved. But I'm just pleased to see that that's behind us, and when kids are eventually able to be in school, that the teachers will be there to support them. And of course, now in this time of COVID, as I say, it's almost ironic in that most learning, if you have good internet, is e-learning, teacher-led. E-learning is primarily how students are learning, and the government's doing everything it can to make sure that even if schools don't come back, that through the teacher-led learning, that students even in grade 12, of course, that important year, will still be able to graduate. So I'm just glad that is all behind us, and look forward to eventually having schools open and functioning when we get through COVID-19.
Yeah, as mentioned, in the meantime, there is some e-learning happening, and the province has also been working on connecting these kids, especially in our area where it is a big issue, connecting them through other means to get online. So just tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so one of the things the Ministry of Education has done is they negotiated a deal between Apple and Rogers, I believe it is, as the provider. And so they negotiated to buy at a discounted price 21,000 iPads, and along with it comes service that are, and then those would be, I believe it would be sold to all the various school boards, and then the school boards would determine the neediest students to be able to take advantage of getting those iPads with a Rogers service. That, it's very, very reasonable. I heard like $9.95 a month or something, so that they can access programming. Now, obviously, in our area, there wouldn't be every place where Rogers is going to have coverage, and so it doesn't cover every situation we have. I mean, the other real challenge that I've certainly heard about through our Zoom meetings across the riding is the challenge of some of the users that are on hubs being charged really big overage charges. So that's certainly a huge issue if you have your whole family at home and you have students trying to learn through e-learning. It's kind of, I think the whole COVID-19 has made it, more shown how important it is to try to get better and better broadband internet coverage across all of Ontario, including Parry, Sound-Muskoka. And of course, it is very challenging because of our geography of rocks, lakes, trees, etc. And I know the province, is investing $300 million over 5 years to try to work towards that, but it's a very slow process, and it's certainly not even across the province or across our riding at this point.
So, Norm, speaking of people that may be connected to the internet and you have wireless signal, they are now getting messages saying that, they've either been in a situation where they've been, someone in that building has been tested positive for COVID-19 or some type of COVID-19 messaging. When people are getting these messages, what's the best route of action for them to be taking?
Yeah, so I mean, it's with COVID-19, it's sort of been another. The scammers are always out there coming up with ways to gain your confidence, and I know we have received notification from our IT people at Queen's Park, sort of warning us about all the various scams that are out there, whether it's phishing or malware or lookalike websites. So, I guess what I'd say to people, if you see these things that look too good to be true, or they probably are, and I'd just be very suspicious of anything, especially anything that's asking for money or personal information. I just would not go there at all for anything like that. So just be cautious and be aware that there are scammers out there taking advantage of the whole COVID-19 situation. So watch out for it.
And just stepping away from the pandemic talk for a moment, we'll talk about another bit of a crisis situation we were facing last year, which was the flooding. The province now, in response to that, has released a strategy. So can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say there was no one more relieved than me that there wasn't flooding this year, because I mean, I certainly thought that what if last year had been this year, right in the middle of COVID-19. So I'm very grateful that we had a pretty easy year in terms of Muskoka for flooding. It went about as well as it could be expected through the freshet. On the Parry Sound and Georgian Bay side of the riding, Great Lakes, the Great Lakes are at the highest they've ever been. In fact, last week when there was a really, really strong northwest wind, it was, I hear from locals, the highest water levels they've ever seen. So that is going to be a continuing factor. But yes, the government took action right after the floods last year and appointed a special advisor, Doug McNeil, a long-time civil servant from Manitoba, who completed a report over the course of the summer into, I think it was November, and then from that formed a flood strategy to be better prepared in all facets of floods. I mean, we're not able to stop floods, but we can be better warned about them. We can do better flood mapping. We can react better to the damage that a flood does. And that's what it's really, the whole flood strategy is geared towards improving upon.
And there was also some relief funding announced as well. Can you expand on that for me?
Sure. So the municipalities, municipalities like Bracebridge were very hard hit. Huntsville, Township, Muskoka Lakes, even McMurray, Monteith, north of us, north of Muskoka. So yes, in total, there was $4.1 million from the province to municipalities through the Municipal Disaster Recovery Assistance Fund. And there was also a pilot project called the Build Back Better as part of that. And the idea of that was if you're going to rebuild a road that's going to be flooded the next time a flood happens, it would make more sense to build it if a foot higher or 2 feet higher makes it above the high water mark, then why not build it back better? So that was a pilot project, and some of our municipalities were able to take advantage of that. So, for example, Bracebridge received $2.3 million through that funding, of which 309,000 was the Build Back Better Fund, and Huntsville received $666,000, of which 88,000 was the Build Back Better Fund, and McMurray Monteith received $101,000, and the Township of Muskoka Lakes received $1,090,000, and that was for things like roads and bridges and culverts and municipal infrastructure. And when I look at Bracebridge, I assume that they rebuilt Beaumont Drive along the Muskoka River, which was heavily flooded, and they built it back at a higher level. So I assume that's would be some of their Build Back Better money went towards doing that.
Norm, I want to switch gears back to COVID-19 and ask you about a conversation I recently had with the NDP critic for community and social services, Lisa Gretzky, who told me about the province's plan to claw back on social assistance for people under social assistance who may be also applying for the CERB fund from the federal government. I don't know if you're able to comment on that or what the plan is from the provincial government on that.
Sure. Well, the federal CERB and the other programs they've come out with are meant to replace money from people who were working who are no longer working. So social assistance in Ontario, like Ontario Works and ODSP, those continue as they did whether there was COVID-19 or not. But people that also claim CERB, yes, some of it will be clawed back, but there actually is an allowance, so they will be better off, even if they're on social assistance and claiming CERB. So, the messaging I have is the majority of individuals on social assistance who receive the CERB will see an increase in their monthly income as a result of this change. But, I think it's important to recognize that CERB is meant for people that had a job and lost it and no longer have an income. So, and there are a bunch of other programs the province has taken to sort of assist those most vulnerable. So there's $200 million going towards municipalities to support their programs and to support nonprofit organizations and food banks, et cetera. There's things like the LEAP program, the low income electricity assistance program that's been stepped up. For everyone, the high electricity prices have been set to the lowest price in the time of use framework. So there's a fairly wide range of different things that the province is investing in to try to think of all the additional costs that people will have.
All right, Norm, well, we're a few minutes away from wrapping the show, but before we go, I do want to talk to you a bit about the local effort of COVID-19. How are you feeling about the response locally in terms of the municipalities and the folk that are living here?
Well, I think it's been good, and the great majority of people are really conscious about doing the right thing, and I think that's proven itself out in the numbers, and that the hospitals who got prepared for the worst case scenario have not been stressed. To get updates from Muskoka Algonquin Healthcare and from West Parry Sound Health Center, and so far, they got prepared. They stopped elective surgeries, as all the hospitals have across the province. So they're at about 50% occupancy and all geared up for it. And luckily, they haven't had the huge numbers that they could have had. So that's testament to all the individuals of Parry, Sound-Muskoka who have done the right thing and
All right.
stopped visiting neighbors. And I'm glad to see that happening. So congratulations to them, and thanks to the mayors for all the communications they've done and the participation in the programs, etc.
Thank you, Norm. I'm going to have to cut you off there. We do have to wrap the show, but I do appreciate you taking the time today.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Thanks again, and thank you everyone for watching. As usual, you should make sure to stay home and stay safe during this pandemic. We don't know when things will be clearing up, but of course, we'll have all the details here on your TV on when you can start getting back and enjoying your life again.